Top-level Ubisoft executive does what modern-day woke video game developers do. He lashed out at gamers, but not only did he lash out at gamers, he lashed out at his fellow developers as well amidst his company failing. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Now, I would be remiss, his company is failing because gamers are not purchasing the products that he is trying to shove down their throats. But so all this comes in the wake of Ubisoft admitting in a press release that they were downgrading its expected yearly net bookings to just 1.95 million euros, and that it would have, quote, around break-even non-IFRS operating income and free cash flow. It also shared that it had softer than expected launch for Star Wars Outlaws, and that Star Wars Outlaws initial sales proved softer than expected. The company also delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows to February 2025, claiming it would, quote, provide additional time to further polish the title. In that press release, they also indicated that they were going to be embracing a player-centric approach moving forward. I do not think that is the case, given these comments here from Stevy Chassard. That does not appear to be what Ubisoft is actually doing. That appears to be just a bunch of hot air from CEO Yves Guillemot and the Ubisoft team. So, about a week after that press release, Chassard took to LinkedIn, where he lashed out at gamers and his fellow developers celebrating the demise of Ubisoft. So I do want to make it clear that this guy is the monetization director at the company. So he is a top-level executive, or seems to be a top-level executive. One would assume that is a top-level position. If you're the monetization director, you're the one who's actually bringing in the money or finding ways to bring in the money aside from just selling your game at a flat fee, right? He's the one coming up with how they are monetizing their games. But he lashed out at gamers and his fellow developers that were celebrating the demise of Ubisoft, or at least that's what it seems like. That is the implication in his post. But he wrote this: I rarely post on social media, but today I am sad, ashamed and sad. The gaming industry is rough at the moment. We all know it. I don't think so. Saber Interactive celebrating massive sales for Space Marine 2. We've seen Black Myth Wukong have record-breaking sales. We're seeing more people than ever playing on Steam. It seems to be only affecting these companies that have embraced woke ideology are the ones that are having all of these problems. Companies that have not embraced this seem to be doing fine and are finding success, finding gamers accepting their games and purchasing them out the wazoo. Nevertheless, he goes on and says, but seeing how gamers react on social medias, wishing ill fate to companies and people alike is sad, and not only towards Ubisoft. So I'm going to read through the rest of this post, and then we'll kind of go through and address a lot of his claims here. Even though it is always the vocal minority that express themselves on social media, I was hurt and ashamed to be a part of this community. He then directed his anger at his fellow developers, saying, what is even more revolting is coming on LinkedIn and seeing the same comments from people within the industry. On top of exposing yourself as a clearly non-decent human being, you are affecting thousands of employees that are already impacted by all the hate, despite doing their best to deliver incredible experiences. One of the things that I was tipped off on by my friend, Brian Niemeyer, novelist. I'll actually include some of his books in the description below. I think his analysis on what's happening in culture is fantastic, but he actually pointed out when someone uses like human being instead of person or people, they're usually have been infected by the woke mind virus, and they don't see their fellow humans with the God-given dignity that they were created. Anyways, he goes on and says this: how can you wish a company to fail simply because they do not cater to you or that the product does not please you is beyond me. It's very simple. We'll get to this. He then concluded saying, we are all on the same boat. Please, please, please stop spreading hate. We should all uplift each other instead of bringing each other down. So we are absolutely not on the same boat. I am not on the same boat with this guy. This guy is clearly on the woke boat. I am not on that boat, and I want that boat to sink and fail. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with wanting that, because wokeism is an evil ideology. And it is Ubisoft that is pushing wokeism. They are the ones pushing this evil. They are the ones pushing the hate. This will be lost on Chassard because he clearly does not understand this. These people have lost their ability to recognize right and wrong. They have it twisted. They have it warped. They think that things that are evil are actually good, and they think things that are good are evil. That is how skewed these people's consciousness have become by woke ideology. And so, as I kind of mentioned earlier, CEO Yves Guillemot did claim in that aforementioned press release, he said this: I want to reaffirm that we are an entertainment-first company creating games for the broadest possible audience, and our goal is not to push any specific agenda. We remain committed to creating games for fans and players that everyone can enjoy. So that is what he said, but we know that's absolute bogus. We have this post here from Chassard making it very clear as he's lashing out at gamers and fellow developers. They are not about creating games for fans and players that everyone can enjoy. We also know this is bogus because if you go to their website, it's very clear that they are pushing wokeism. They have an entire section of the website that is labeled diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. And on that website or on that page, you get a statement from Rashi Sika, Ubisoft's VP of Global Diversity and Inclusion. That's right. They have an entire department called Global Diversity and Inclusion and a VP heading it up. And she says this: for Ubisoft, putting diversity and inclusion at the heart of everything we do means providing an environment where employees can thrive, building open-minded communities where players can connect, and creating games that reflect the diversity of the world we live in. So right there, they do have an agenda. Their agenda is putting diversity and inclusion at the heart of everything we do. That is wokeism. That, because it actually is not inclusion, it's actually exclusion. We know this based on what they actually do. We'll get to this in a little bit. They literally have an illegal mentorship program that excludes men. Not very inclusive, not very diverse. Is it? Because none of that is actually true, because it's all a lie. It's all about pushing division. Again, get to that as well. Anyways, she goes on and says, we will not accomplish all these goals overnight. Just as it takes years of iteration to develop a AAA title, we will only become a more diverse and inclusive company by continuously improving, trying new ideas, and learning from the results. It's a long-term commitment, one that we will tackle with the same passion and dedication that we bring to our games. So we'll see if that's the case. There is a report now from Bloomberg that Ubisoft is going to go private, get bought out by the Guillemot family and Tencent. We'll see if that does indeed happen. Obviously, there is a lot of pressure on this company given its massive, massive failures over the past year. So we even have a rumor that they spent $650 to $850 million on Skull and Bones. Absolute disaster. XDefiant sales not looking good. Star Wars Outlaws soft sales, softer than expected. About 1 million units is what is the rumor that we have. That is 20% of what analysts were expecting was a conservative estimate. They were expecting 5 million conservative estimate. I mean, it's not looking good. And then you can go to the Pandora game, etc. Lots of losses adding up for this company. Anyways, if you go back to the Ubisoft website here, the site, it says this: we want to build the most creative, inclusive, and diverse teams across all fields. We will continue to increase representation in our company by building more inclusion across our systems and ensuring equal access to opportunities for everyone. So obviously, if you're trying to increase representation, you are literally excluding people and you're trying to increase percentages. So you have quotas, and in order to fill those quotas, there are certain people that you can't hire because that would change the percentage for that quota. So again, not inclusive. Not inclusive. Evil stuff. It also asserts we will create gaming experiences that push representation forward by embedding diversity and inclusion across our processes, increasing representation in our teams, and offering access to resources that help teams to build more authentic, inclusive, and accessible gaming experiences. So they're literally admitting that they are engaging in illegal hiring practices by, quote, increasing representation in our teams. It then says this: we will set the standard for inclusion for our games, players, and partners, and we'll collaborate with leading organizations to expand our knowledge, grow our reach, give back to the community, and champion inclusion in our industry. So they're not just trying to do it within their own company. They are trying to spread this poison to the entire industry and obviously to the players that are playing their game. They're trying to indoctrinate them with this ideology. This is on their website. It's all very easily searchable. They're not hiding this at all. In 2023, the company also made it clear it had a focus on queer representation in games. It said this: as the inclusive games and content team works, like, that's right, they have an inclusive games and content team. Ubisoft has an inclusive games and content team. Remember what Yves Guillemot tried to tell us? that they don't have any specific agenda? You do. You literally have departments pushing this agenda, helping them identify opportunities to tell inclusive stories at the beginning stages of production. They are reflecting in particular on how to provide frameworks and best practices for authentic queer representation. So they're literally pushing the gay agenda. They're trying to push that disordered lifestyle through their games and onto their players to normalize that degenerate, disordered behavior. That's exactly what they are trying to do, and they're admitting it. And then they go on and provide an example. For instance, senior manager of the inclusive games and content team, Maya L'Oreal, and her team have built a resource that helps production teams make more inclusive character creatives for games that do not label physical traits or link voices to particular bodies. And they help production teams connect with experts who are cultural insiders from the LGBTQIA+ community. So they're literally trying to push the transgender ideology as well, link voices to particular bodies, because it's like, oh, you can have a male voice on a female body. That's totally fine because there's no distinction between men and women. That's literally what these people are trying to do. They have a character creator. They have a product that they use eternally to do this stuff, but they don't have any specific agenda. Are you kidding me? You do. This is divisive. This is hateful. You're trying to lead people down paths of destruction. You're trying to get people to start embracing chemical castration. And then eventually you probably want people to start actually physically mutilating themselves and then taking their own lives, because that's where this leads. That's where this ideology leads. That is hate. That is evil. That is what Ubisoft is doing, Mr. Chassard. That is what your company is doing. So yes, I'm going to celebrate your company failing when you are pushing this evil agenda. There's nothing wrong with that. We should celebrate this. I'm going to get to a more in-depth reason here in a little bit. The company also stated it was working with Temple University's Department of Media Studies and production professor, as well as a member of GLAAD's Gaming Advisory Council professor, Adrian Shaw. So they're working with this woman named Adrian Shaw, who is a quote-unquote academic and is really just an activist working with GLAAD, right? To build out their resources for developers even more. So they clearly have an agenda because GLAAD has an agenda, right? And if you're working with GLAAD, you're pushing the agenda. With a particular emphasis on showing diverse queer representation, experiences, and identities that are not limited to one character. Again, clearly pushing the agenda. That is very clear what you are doing. It's literally on your website right there. Got a screenshot of it right there if you want to look at it. And then, as I said, they have this illegal mentorship program called Develop at Ubisoft. Here's the eligibility criteria. Identify as a woman or a non-binary individual. So basically no men allowed in this this program. And obviously a legal analyst, Andrew Esquire, says this is illegal. He says this is not okay. And this is something they're going to get in trouble for. And they should, by the way. And then he actually says that anyone who applies to this should reach out to law firms such as America First Legal that operate in Texas to bring a lawsuit against Ubisoft for this illegal mentorship program. And I agree with him. I think that is true as well. So this is why this stuff is bad. I brought this up before. Bishop Barron, I think he does a really good job of laying out why wokeism is so evil and why we should oppose it. He did this in an interview with Angelus News a couple years ago. And he says this: the advocates of the so-called woke ideology today have not been shy about articulating the philosophical underpinnings of their perspective. They do indeed find inspiration in Marx, Nietzsche, Sartre, Derrida, and Foucault, among others. From these modern and postmodern thinkers, they derive a number of principles. First, they advocate a deeply antagonistic social theory whereby the world is divided sharply into the two classes of oppressors and oppressed. Second, they relativize moral value and see classical morality as an attempt by the ruling class to maintain itself in power. Again, that goes back to this idea that they cannot understand right and wrong. It's all relative, etc. Third, they focus not so much on the individual as on racial and ethnic categories, and hence they endorse the idea of collective guilt and recommend a sort of reverse discrimination to address the injustices of the past. We see that in their focus on building out their teams for representation, right? That's clearly in Ubisoft. Fourth, they tend to demonize the market economy and the institutions of democracy as part of a superstructure defending the privileged. Fifth, they push toward equity of outcome throughout the society rather than equality of opportunity. And finally, wokeism employs divisive and aggressive strategies of accusation that are contrary to the gospel demand to love our enemies. We see that with Chassard, right? He is making these divisive accusations against gamers and his fellow developers for comments he sees that I assume are people like myself celebrating the demise of this company because it pushes this agenda. And so he tries to he's employed a divisive strategy of accusation that's contrary to loving our enemies, which is he's clearly not. He's just being hateful. What do they say? They lie, they double down, and they project. That's exactly what this guy's doing. But Bishop Barron then says, suffice it to say that Catholic social teaching stands to thwart all of this. It wants social justice, of course, but not on woke terms. Its heroes are not Marx, Nietzsche, and Foucault, but rather Isaiah, Amos, Jeremiah, Jesus the Lord, Ambrose, Aquinas, and Teresa of Calcutta. So I think Bishop Barron does a really good job of kind of explaining that, putting that into perspective on why we oppose this stuff, why it's evil, and why we should say no to this stuff. So in regards to celebrating the downfall of a company, I think it's pretty simple. But Father Hugh Barber, I think, has a really good explanation here on Catholic.com. And he explains this. In the classic literature of the ancient church, and indeed of the ancient world that St. Thomas was following, the form of insulting was only the opposite of the form of rejoicing or celebrating. This means that because we possess some great good in which we take joy and delight and express it, so too we mock the evil things that try to prevent us from having it. As an example, Father Barber points to Miriam, the sister of Moses, and her song glorifying God after he punished the Egyptians when they were able to escape Egypt, and God brought the Red Sea crashing down upon the Egyptians after the Israelites were able to flee across it. And this is what she's saying: sing to the Lord, for he is gloriously triumphant. Horse and chariot he has cast into the sea. So obviously, she is giving glory to God there, but she is also saying why she's giving glory to him, because he destroyed the people that were trying to kill them, trying to destroy them, trying to put them back into bondage physically. And I think we can take a similar angle here when we look at companies like Ubisoft that are literally trying to turn people into mind slaves to this woke ideology, whether that be feminism, whether that be transgender ideology, whether that be the gay ideology, whether that be any of these various tentacles of wokeism, right? We can celebrate people, and maybe not people, but companies that are pushing this stuff. We can celebrate their demise. I do not think there is anything wrong with that. But as far as people, Father Barber does caution this. He says, human beings may have truly persecuted us in the deepest sense by trying to separate us from God, but we can pray and strive for their conversion, rendering not insult for insult, but mercy and compassion. In the case of those who are still in this earthly life and can be converted, we should not insult or gloat, but rather warn and threaten with God's judgment in the hope of correcting and refuting error. And I agree. I think that Stevie Chassard here needs to abandon the woke ideology of Ubisoft. He needs to repent. He needs to abandon pushing these divisive strategies that he has employed. He needs to apologize to the gamers and the developers that he has insulted. And I think that he should embrace his French legacy and come back to Christ and come back to God, because God's mercy is endless. It is limitless. He's standing there with open arms waiting for you to return, and he should return. And so I just wanted to conclude here by putting the cherry on top. Chassard does prove that Guillemot's comments to Ubisoft, taking a more player-centric approach was nothing more than hot air. And I kind of said this already, but I think it's very obvious now that high-level executives could care less about players, and Chassard proves that he holds significant disdain for them. It begs the question of how many more Ubisoft executives hold similar beliefs? How many more are like Stevie Chassard and hate you for not wanting to go along with their woke ideology and refusing to purchase the game so they can shove that ideology down your throat? Let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other. And let's take Father Hugh Barber's advice and pray for our enemies, including Stevie Chassard, that he does indeed repent and changes his ways and gets back to creating things that will lead one to the truth.